Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Fi, Anko and Laura? Part 1. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, so without wasting any time let's get into the video. Naruto groaned as he started coming to. The last thing he remembered was fighting in the war and against some woman named Kaguya Otsutsuki. Wait, scrap that, his most recent memory was fighting Sasuke. This time, his friend really gave him no other choice than to end his life. But how did he end up here? Stranded on the beach of some town in who the hell knows where. Sitting up, he clutched at his head and let out an agonized groan. When he pulled his hand away, he saw fresh blood on his hand. What in the world? Taking a moment to relax and think on his circumstances, he struggled as he tried to remember exactly what the hell happened to him this time. Think, Naruto. You killed Sasuke, but what happened after that? You were exhausted, barely even conscious. Thinking on it for a time, he soon remembered the sight of pink hair and gravity-defying silver hair growing closer to him. His vision was blurred and their voices were slightly muffled, but he swore he could hear them saying something about a monster and Sasuke-kun. When he regained consciousness, he was brought before the council, and not even Tsunade sided with him this time. The vote was for death, just as he had been expecting. Why the hell didn't I fight back? Naruto wondered, feeling frustrated as hell with himself for just taking all of their insults, their attacks, all of it. When the assault was finally over and they thought he was finally dead, they had done something to him, but he wasn't entirely sure just what the hell it was that had happened to him after that. All he knew is that he was exhausted and oh so tired of dealing with the Uchiha's beepsicking fanatics. Now here he was, in a land he knew nothing about, with a severe injury to his head. Why it was still bleeding, he had no idea. He wasn't even sure how he had come to have such a severe wound to his skull. Shaking it off, he slowly stood to his feet and wobbled a bit, nearly falling over again as he did. Looking around, he suddenly remembered something. Kurama. Are you there? Receiving no response, he tried again. Kurama. You big furry bastard, talk to me. Again, there was no response. Fearing the worst, he delved into his mindscape, appearing before the open cage. Kurama. Looking around, Naruto didn't see anything for a while. He didn't even hear his furry friend breathing. Hurrying into the darkness of the cage, he breathed a huge sigh of relief when he saw Kurama lying there. However, he quickly noticed that Kurama was pale and he only had a single tail. All of his other tails were gone. What the hell? It was at this point that Naruto noticed something else. Looking behind him, he saw 9 tails sprouting from the base of his spine. On top of that, his nails had turned into elongated curved claws. Looking into the water, he saw that his pupils had become slitted, though they remained the same blue color he was so used to. What in the hell happened to me? He wondered aloud. Looking back at Kurama, he walked over and patted him gently on the head. Take the time you need to rest and recover, buddy. Whatever happened, it must have been bad. He said before he vanished from his mindscape. As soon as he opened his eyes, Naruto was caught off guard when he saw a group of people staring at him. Looking around at each of them, he raised his hand and waved. Hi. The tall man at the front of the group quirked a brow and asked, what the heck are you? You're definitely not like anyone I've ever met before. Naruto sighed and rubbed the back of his head as he gauged his chances against these people if it came down to a fight. He was still a little disoriented, though his wound did seem to be closing now. His natural healing factor was still there, but it was working a tad slowly at the moment for reasons he wasn't sure of. Shrugging that thought off, he looked into the man's eyes calmly. Would you believe me if I told you I was a human, like you and your friends? Depends. Be honest with me and I'll be honest with you. The name's Rutger. I'm the leader of a Jaeger Corps. By the name of Zephyr. I'll introduce you to the others later. Right now I want to know about you. You're definitely not a human anymore, based off of appearances. That and you've got blood in your hair and face. The hell happened to you? The now named Rutger questioned. Naruto touched his face and frowned as he felt dried blood. I definitely need a shower. He said with a chuckle. After a moment, he looked squarely into Rutger's eyes and said, if I'm right, I've become a Hanyu. That would explain the tails, the claws, and those ears on top of your head too, I'm assuming. Rutger questioned with a grin. Blinking, Naruto reached up and felt, much to his own amusement, fox ears atop his head. Well, that's new. Oh well. He said with a shrug. I'm also what's known as a shinobi. We do a variety of missions ranging from assassinations, escort and protect missions, infiltration and reconnaissance, you name it, we pretty much did it. So long as we were paid the right amount for a job, we'd do it. Though we reserve the right to turn down requests from corrupt evil bastards, potential rapists, whatever. Anyways, I was betrayed by the people I trusted. They tried to kill me and I don't really remember much else. When I woke up, I was here with a wound on my head, blood in my eye, and generally feeling like crap. Wonderful, huh? he questioned sarcastically. Rutger chuckled and said, sounds like you've got some interesting stories to tell. I've got a good feeling about you, kiddo. Tell you what, you join me and my fellow Jaegers and I'll take real good care of you. You'll be treated like family and on top of that, you'd be safe. Nobody screws with the Jaeger King, after all. What'd you say? Naruto stared at him skeptically for a time before looking around at the others. They each looked like they could definitely handle themselves in a fight. Then he took notice of a petite girl standing at Rutger's side. Tilting his head, he thought to himself, she looks like a cat girl. Weird. Shrugging it off, he returned his gaze to Rutger and said, tell me something first. Are we still in the elemental nations? Rutger frowned in confusion and asked, elemental nations? The hell? I've never heard of such a place. You sure you didn't hit your head too hard? The blonde Hanyu shook his head and said, it's fine. I'm from someplace called the elemental nations. I don't know where I am now. Hell, for all I know, I'm in a new world or something. So if you can teach me about wherever we are, I'd greatly appreciate it. Tell me though, what does your group do, exactly? The tall man chuckled and said, we do a bit of everything. Assassinations are something of a specialty, but we also act as protectors, spies, whatever people need, we pretty much do it. For the right price, of course. So in a way, we're like these shinobi you speak of. It would only make sense for you to join us, now wouldn't it? Naruto chuckled and said, sounds like I'll fit in just fine. Sure. Might take me a little while to get into the swing of things, but this should be a beneficial partnership, I think. Glad to hear it. Now come on kid, let's get you cleaned up and into something more than those rags you're wearing. Rutger said before turning and motioning for Naruto and the others to follow him. This should be an interesting experience. Let's see what the Jaeger lifestyle is like. Might be nice to make a few real friends. Then again, I don't even know if I can trust these people yet. Still, might be worth it to extend the olive branch and see what they do with it. Naruto thought to himself as he followed Rutger and the others. As he did, he couldn't help but notice the curious glances the silver-haired girl kept giving him. I wonder what her deal is. 2 years later. Thor's military academy in the town of Trista. Not sure how I should feel about being enrolled in a new school like this by that woman. Sarah Veilstein, if I'm remembering it right. She must have been watching us for a while if she found us so fast after Rutger's death. Looking down at the girl using his lap as a pillow, he smiled and began gently running his fingers through her messy, silver hair. The girl's name was Phi Clausel, adopted daughter of Rutger Clausel. She was currently 15 years old while he was now 19. They had grown quite close and stuck together after Rutger's death. Speaking of which, that death bothered Naruto greatly. Rutger had been like a father to Naruto, so seeing him die pissed him off more than anything. Then the members of Zephyr split up and now he didn't know jack about where any of them had disappeared to. Some friends. Naruto thought irritably. Now here they were, in the town of Trista. The both of them were wearing red uniforms, though he didn't know the significance of such a thing. Everyone else either wore green or white uniforms. He assumed the ones wearing white uniforms were the noble children, while the green uniforms were the commoners. So what were the red ones for? Shrugging it off, he soon lost himself in thought once again. I hate the whole class system bullshit. Nobles and commoners it shouldn't matter. And yet the class system means everything to these people. Nobles look down on everyone else and treat them like shit just because they can. I thought I could escape from such prejudices after coming to Erebonia. No stigmas, no bigotry of any kind, damn that would have been wonderful. And now I'm going back to school. I hate school, damn it. Naruto thought to himself. Naruto would have continued delving into his thoughts, but he soon felt someone poking his nose. Looking down at Phi again, he saw her looking up into his eyes. You're thinking too much. Calm down. Sorry Phi-chan. Did you have a good nap? Naruto questioned with a warm smile on his face. Yep. Come on. Phi said before hopping off of the bench and running on ahead. Naruto would have followed her immediately, but he noticed another teen in a red uniform looking at him. Yo. You're wearing a red uniform too, huh? Nice to meet ya. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. And you are? Rin. Rin Schwartzer. It's nice to meet you. The now named Rin said. Cool. I'd stay and chat with you for a bit, you and my girlfriend's kinda run ahead. So catch you later Rin. Naruto said before he rushed on ahead, leaving Rin standing there a bit dumbstruck. Later auditorium. Naruto was frowning deeply as he thought about what had happened at the front gate of the academy. Would we have to hand over our weapons? I wonder what the hell they're planning. Feeling someone poke him in the cheek, Naruto looked at Phi and sighed softly. Thinking too hard again. Seeing her nod, he chuckled softly and looked at the various people lined up in front of everyone. Let's listen to what Mr. Principal has to say. We can figure everything else out later. As the principal droned on about one thing or another, Naruto eyed the other students, trying to get a good read on them. He could see a number of other students wearing red uniforms, but they were outnumbered by quite a bit. The most prominent color in the room was green. White uniforms were just slightly less common. Deciding to focus on the students in red uniforms like himself, he spotted a rather beautiful blonde girl with striking rouge-colored eyes. The next he took notice of was a boy with dark green hair and glasses. He seemed to be casting hateful glances at the various noble students in the room. He noticed an orange-haired boy sitting beside Reen, and in another row he spotted a rather tall boy that immediately made him think of the Nord Highlands. I wonder if he's from there. Feeling somebody pinching his arm, he snapped out of his thoughts and looked into Phi's eyes. Listen, she said, pointing at the principal. Nodding, he rubbed at the sore spot on his arm as he finally tuned into what the principal was saying. Now, if I may, I'd like to say a few words in closing about this academy's illustrious history. Smiling at all the students, Principal Van Dyck said, Thor's military academy was founded almost 220 years ago. Its founder, as I'm sure you're all aware, was none other than the great Emperor Drychels. The very same emperor who ended the War of the Lions and returned prosperity to the Erebonian Empire. 30 years after becoming emperor, in the later years of his life, he opened the doors of this institution. It was to be a place where young people like yourselves could learn the art of war. Naruto frowned at this and thought silently to himself, reminds me of Konoha's Shinobi Academy. I swear, why can't there ever be peace? Is peace really such an unattainable dream? Shaking that thought off, he resumed listening to the principal's speech. But with the mechanization of the military, many of our graduates now pursue careers outside of the army. Our mission, however, remains the same. To prepare our students to fulfill Emperor Drychels' famous mandate. Arise, O youth, and become the foundation of the world. Van Dyck said. Sounds all nice and peachy when he puts it like that. Seeking careers outside of the various armies is all well and good, and it sounds wonderful, but there's still all kinds of conflict and so much corruption in the people. Naruto thought grimly. Though much has happened these past 2¼ centuries, the world is still the domain of the young. Still, the question remains. What qualities must one possess to become a part of its foundation? I hope this credo will serve as a guide and an inspiration to you during your 2 years at this academy. Go forth, my students. The world awaits the great things you will one day accomplish. Van Dyck finished his speech and stood straight again, staring kindly at the various first-year students. Foundation of the world, huh? That's an intriguing concept. Naruto thought to himself with a shrug. Have to admit, the guy's a great public speaker. That was quite the speech. I wonder how many times he's had to give it. He thought with a chuckle. Pai looked at her boyfriend and gently tugged on his sleeve. Thoughts? Naruto shrugged as he hugged his girlfriend against him. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what to think. It sounds all fine and dandy, but in the end, there's still so much corruption and chaos in the world. I want peace between the people. No more social diversity, no more hatred, just acceptance and happiness. Achieving that dream is nigh impossible, however. Still, it's worth a shot, right? Can't make a difference if I don't attempt it in the first place. I smiled at him and kissed his cheek. Love you. I love you too, Phi-chan. Before they could say anything more, a rather obnoxious voice said, and that brings us to the close of Thor's 215th entrance ceremony. Next, please proceed to the class designated in your guidebook. Seeing who the voice belonged to, Naruto scowled and said, that must be the vice principal. I can tell already that he's a pompous asshole. I nodded in agreement. True. Don't antagonize him. She said, looking into Naruto's eyes with a stern gaze. I won't. Promise. Naruto said. Doesn't mean I won't prank the hell out of him if need be. There, you will go over the school rules, as well as your class's curriculum. That is all. You're dismissed. The vice principal finished. Naruto frowned after a moment as he watched most of the other students leave the auditorium. Looking into Phi's eyes, he asked, guidebook. Did our guidebooks mention anything about that? Phi shook her head. Negative. Sighing, Naruto rubbed the back of his head and looked around at his surroundings. I wonder where we're supposed to go. Alright. Students in the red uniforms, if I can have your attention, please. A female's voice said. Turning, Naruto and Phi instantly recognized Sarah Veilstein. Oh goody. This should be entertaining. Naruto thought with a chuckle. By now, you're probably all pretty confused, right? Where's my class assignment? You're probably thinking. That's perfectly understandable, your situation is a little more complicated than the other students. Dude, before I explain, I'd like all of you to join me for a special orienteering exercise. Sarah said, a small, barely noticeable grin on her face. Naruto and Phi deadpanned and thought, well, this is gonna suck. What? The green-haired boy shouted. The beautiful blonde he had noticed earlier asked, don't you mean an orientation exercise? Meanwhile, a blue-haired girl that just screamed noble upbringing, hummed and thought. Worry not. Everything will be made clear soon enough. Now, right this way, if you don't mind. Sarah said before she began leading the 10 first-year students out of the auditorium. At first, nobody followed her, clearly confused about what the heck was going on. A bespectacled girl tried to say something, but Sarah was already out the door. Looks like we're gonna have to follow her if we want any answers. The tall boy Naruto had noticed earlier said. When he heard a heavy sigh, Naruto turned to see another noble, this one a blonde male. Shrugging, he turned back to the others and said, well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to follow her. Might as well see what this is all about, after all. Naruto said before he exited the auditorium where Sarah was waiting patiently for them. When the others began pouring out of the auditorium, he smirked and said, about time you guys made up your minds. And with that, they followed Sarah behind the academy's main building and down a path leading into the woods behind the academy. Upon arriving at their destination, Naruto looked up at the building and said, and this place just screams old, abandoned schoolhouse. Lem guess, we're going to see some crazy shit in here, right? Sarah simply chuckled as she unlocked the door and went inside. Once she was gone, Naruto massaged his forehead for a time. Yeep, this is gonna be an interesting experience for sure. What is this place? The orange-haired boy asked. Why is there a building this dilapidated on campus? It looks like it should have been torn down ages ago. Rin said. The blonde girl frowned and asked, what does she even want us to do here? Is she ever going to tell us what's going on? The green-haired teen questioned somewhat irritably. I suppose we'll just have to go inside and see for ourselves what awaits us. The blue-haired noble girl said. Afterwards, she and most of the others made their way inside, leaving only Rin and Elliot behind. This place looks like some old haunted mansion or something, Elliot said, chuckling somewhat nervously. Rin nodded and said, now that you mention it, it really kind of does, thinking on what Naruto said earlier. He sighed and said, Naruto seems to know something, so I suppose we can ask him if need be. Naruto? Elliot questioned. Oh, you haven't been formally introduced to him yet, have you? Naruto was that blonde guy with the spiky hair and blue eyes. Rin explained. Oh. I wonder what kind of person he is. Elliot wondered. Afterwards, he and Rin followed the others inside. Once inside, they looked around the rather large room for a moment in curiosity. Afterwards, they walked over and stood in line before Sarah. The name's Sarah Veilstein. I'm the instructor in charge of Class VII, which means you get the pleasure of seeing me all year. I know, you're all excited about spending more time with this lovely lady, I'm sure. Glad to finally meet you. Despite himself, Naruto went SNRK. As he struggled to hold in his laughter. I swear, she's like Anko-chan. I never thought I'd meet someone like her here. That's awesome. Wait, Class VII? The bespectacled boy shouted in confusion. Us? Elliot questioned unsurely. The blue-haired girl frowned in thought for a time and said, I'm not quite sure I understand. I wasn't told anything about this at enrollment. The bespectacled girl with the large breasts, hey, it was hard not to notice her ample chest, asked, excuse me, Instructor Sarah. I was under the impression that there were only 5 classes at this academy and that students were split up among them based on their social class and home region. Sarah clapped once and nodded in confirmation. Right you are, Miss Top Scorer on the Thor's entrance exam. Students in each year are divided into 5 classes. 2 for the nobility and 3 for commoners. And it's been that way for ages, right up through last year. But this year, we decided to shake things up a little. What do you? The bespectacled girl started to question. We now have a 6th class. Sarah said, interrupting the girl. This class is fittingly titled Class VII. And in Class VII, we recognize no distinction between nobles and commoners. Wait, you just jumped straight from V to VII? Rin asked, feeling rather confused. He asked it before I could. It is strange. Oh well, let's hear what she has to say. Naruto thought to himself as he looked up at Instructor Sarah. They're really putting nobles and commoners in the same class? The blonde girl questioned unsurely. This must be some kind of joke. The green-haired boy exclaimed angrily. And why is this the first that I've heard of it? Well, who were you again? Sarah questioned, chuckling nervously afterwards. Machia's Renitz. The now named Machia said, sounding rather proud of himself. And with all due respect, Instructor, it's ludicrous to intermix nobles and commoners like this. Must I be forced to spend my next 2 years shoulder to shoulder with those arrogant, stuck-up hedonists? Naruto frowned at him and thought, not all nobles are terrible people. Sure, I hate the nobility just as much as the next commoner, but even I can recognize that there are good nobles and bad nobles. Seriously, something must have happened to him in the past to make him despise nobles so vehemently. You do know I'm not the one who made the decision, right? Sarah questioned. Besides, what's the big deal? You're all kids. Can't you all just, I dunno, get along or something? Just get along, huh? And how exactly would you propose we do that? Machias questioned. Naruto shook his head and said, trust me, it's easier than you think it is, Machias. If we're going to be in the same class as nobles, we might as well play nice and try to get along, even make friends with each other. Then again, I'm not the best at making friends, so I might end up failing in that regard. I gently grasped Naruto's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze in reassurance. You'll be okay. Thanks, Phi-chan. Naruto said. Machias turned to Naruto, ready to blow up at him too. However, he thought it over for a moment before deciding to just ignore the whiskered teen. The blonde noble scoffed. Hearing this, the green-haired boy turned to face him and asked, and what the hell's your problem? Sighing at this, Naruto facepalmed himself and mumbled irritably, he's even worse than I am at the whole make friends thing. Got quite the attitude on him, doesn't he? I smirked up at her boyfriend and said, true. Oh well. Oh, nothing much. I just find the irony of your behavior rather humorous. The blonde noble said. Is that so? It seems the scion of some noble house has left the comfort of his mansion to grace the unwashed masses with his wisdom. Please, Millard, do share your esteemed name with us so I can give you all the respect you deserve. Machias said with a huge dose of sarcasm mixed in. The blonde looked at Machias and said, Jusis Alberia. Not that I'd expect the name of an arrogant, stuck-up hedonist to lodge itself in that hard head of yours. Machias was obviously caught off guard by Jusis's introduction. Elliot, meanwhile, was shocked. He's from one of the four great houses. Breen nodded and said, the son of Duke Alberia, lord of the Cruzan province in the southeast. The blonde girl hummed for a moment before saying, well, you don't get much more noble than that. The blue-haired girl said, interesting. I'd heard the rumors. Meanwhile, the tall kid from Nord just looked plain confused. Meanwhile, Phi yawned and shrugged her shoulders. Doesn't matter. Naruto chuckled softly and patted Phi atop the head gently. At least it doesn't to us. Nobles, commoners, none of that matters to us. You, on the other hand, mean far more to me than anyone or anything else in the world. Phi blushed a bit but didn't say anything in response. Instead, they listened as Machias shouted, do you expect me to be impressed? Your family lineage means nothing to me. I'll never bend my knee to the likes of. Sarah clapped her hands to get their attention. Okay already, that's enough of that. I'm sure a couple of you have a few grievances, but now's not the time. I'll hear your complaints later. Right now, you've got your orienteering exercise, and far be it from me to keep you from our fun little icebreaker. Machias grunted in annoyance, but didn't say anything more. Still, he did keep a glare pointed in Jusis's direction. Meanwhile, the blonde girl asked, you mentioned this, orienteering exercise earlier. What exactly does that involve? The big-breasted girl asked, it's a form of outdoor competition, isn't it? Something like a cross between a map-reading exercise and a scavenger hunt. Is that why they ask us to hand over our weapons at the gate? Rin questioned. Hearing this question made Naruto perk up, curious to hear Sarah's answer. Nothing gets by you, does it? Sarah questioned before she smirked and began stepping backwards little by little until she was near a pillar. Dude, I don't want to spoil the fun, so let's get started, shall we? And with that, she pressed a hidden button built into the pillar. Naruto deadpanned as the floor beneath them shook. Oh you bitch. He muttered as he instinctively clung to the floor via use of his chakra. What? Elliot started to ask in horror. Oh crap. Rin exclaimed as he realized what was about to happen. Sure enough, the floor opened up, revealing itself to be a rather large trapdoor. Naruto frowned as he watched everyone sliding down the ramp. Looking up, he could see Phi had used a grappling hook of sorts to save herself. However, Sarah cut the line and watched as Phi began to fall. Oh you bitch. Naruto muttered again before he caught Phi and landed on the ramp, letting himself slide down it until he reached the bottom with Phi held close in his arms. Once at the bottom, Naruto set Phi down gently before he looked around at all the others. Thankfully, they all seemed to be just fine, though many of them had fallen unconscious after what had just happened to them. Glancing over towards Rin, he saw that the blonde girl was atop of him, her breasts practically smothering him. Frowning at this, Naruto released a sigh and walked over, helping the girl off of Rin and laid her down against the wall. Looking down at Rin, Naruto said, you owe me for this. Rin breathed a sigh of relief and said, thanks Naruto. Much appreciated. Of course. Nuo, let's see how the others are doing, shall we? Naruto suggested. Ugh, what just happened? Machias questioned as he came to. The floor gave out from under us, the bespectacled girl said. The blue-haired noble frowned and shook her head. I can't believe I fell for such an obvious trap. The boy from Nord sat up and looked around the room. Does this mean there's a series of catacombs beneath the school grounds, then? HMPH. What does that woman think she's playing at? Jusis questioned as he rose to his feet. I sighed at this point as she looked at her boyfriend. So lame. Naruto frowned for a moment before he flicked her nose gently. Come on, think of this as an opportunity to make some new friends. Who knows? It might be kind of fun. Scrunching up her nose for a minute, the petite girl lightly punched her boyfriend in the chest and said, "Stop doing that." All Naruto did was chuckled in response. It was at this point that Elliot sat up, a hand on his chest. Phew. I thought my heart was going to jump out of my chest. Hey Reen, are you okay? Reen nodded and said, I am. In more ways than one, actually. Chuckling nervously, he motioned towards Naruto and Alyssa. Naruto helped me out of a dangerous situation. The blonde girl groaned as she started to regain consciousness. What would happen? Reen smiled at her as he sat up. The floor opened beneath us. We fell down here, though I'm not sure how to get back up there. He admitted. Is that woman crazy? We could have been seriously hurt or worse. The girl exclaimed angrily. Naruto shrugged and said, it's not too bad, all things considered. At least it was a ramp we landed on and not the hard ground. I'd really rather nobody get a broken leg or something from a fall that high. What is this place, anyway? Reen wondered aloud. Looking around the room, he could see everyone's weapons and small boxes laid out on what appeared to be stone tables protruding from the ground. I was wondering the same thing. We should check out those tables. Elliot suggested. It was at this point that a phone seemingly began to ring. What the? Elliot questioned. Is this? Reen started to ask as the group of 10 opened their Arcus units. It's coming from the devices we received with the Academy guidebook, the bespectacled girl said. Seems to be some sort of portable armament. The blue-haired girl said. Right you are. These handy little devices are a special kind of battle armament. Sarah's voice could be heard saying. Is that Ms. Veilstein? The tall boy questioned. Machias asked, so these devices have built-in communications functionality, then? Wait, don't tell me these things are. The blonde girl began, only to pause, letting her question hang. New model battle armaments made through a partnership between the Epstein Foundation and the Reinford Company. Newly made 5th generation battle armaments, in fact. They're called Arcus units. Sarah explained. Arcus, Reen said quietly to himself. So these are battle armaments, the bespectacled girl said. That means they'll allow us to use arts, right? Sure will. Just set a quartz into one of its slots and you can use arts all the live long day. Which is why I've prepared enough quartz for each and every one of you. Sarah said. After a moment, the lights in the room turned on, lighting up the room for them. Looking around, they could all see their weapons, along with the little boxes containing a quartz. The weapons you brought are all here too, each pack a god neatly alongside a little box containing a quartz. Find yours and try setting the quartz into your Arcus. I suppose it can't hurt to try. The blue-haired girl said before she walked off towards her weapon. Naruto and Phi nodded to each other before they split up and approached their weapons. Upon reaching his, the blonde tuned out the others and their conversation as he picked up his weapons. The weapons he had chosen upon joining the Jaeger Corps. Known as Zephyr. A sword that appeared to double as a chainsaw that he called Yado. By pressing a button on the handle of the sword, he could activate the sword's jagged blades and really tear into people. It could also be used for stabbing, slicing, and penetrating attacks, rather than the brutality of the chainsaw part of the sword. After strapping his weapon to his back, he proceeded to open the small box and pulled out what was inside. It was definitely a quartz of some kind, but it was different too. Huh. He muttered quietly to himself. That's called a master quartz. If you set that into the large slot in the center of your Arcus, you'll be able to use arts. Go on. Give it a try. Sarah exclaimed over the orbital communications device they each had. Naruto frowned as he looked the strange quartz over carefully. With a shrug of his shoulders, he inserted the master quartz, something called Scepter, which seemed to be a water-type master quartz. Once it was equipped, he looked at all the empty slots in his Arcus unit. Now if only I had some regular quartz to insert into his thing. He said quietly to himself. As soon as everyone had done as instructed, the Arcus units and their bodies began to glow with a blue light. Blinking at this, Naruto looked himself over for a moment before returning his gaze to his Arcus unit. Well, that's different. That light means that you've successfully synchronized with your Arcus. Congratulations. Now you can use arts as much as you want. Of course, these Arcus units have plenty more nifty features, but I wouldn't want to bombard you with too much info all at once, so we'll cover those another time. Anyway, since you've got your Arcus all set up and ready to go, here's what I want you to do. Sarah's voice could be heard saying. Before anyone could question her, the door nearby opened on its own, causing a few of them to jump from the shock. When you step through that door, you'll be in an underground testing area. Basically it's a dungeon. It's pretty large and full of twists and turns. I'd almost guarantee you'll get lost at least once. But when you find the exit, you'll be able to return to the first floor of this old schoolhouse. There are monsters wandering around though, so don't let your guard down even for a moment. With all that said, let's commence with our special orienteering exercise. Your objective is to make your way through this area and back to the surface. Make it back in one piece, and I'll be happy to field any complaints you might have. If you make it back safely, I might even give you a kiss, free of charge. On the cheek, of course. Naruto found himself smirking as he regrouped with the others. Oh yeah, she and Anko would get along great. I like her. He thought with a chuckle. Elliot started to say, only to pause. I don't think she's joking. The blonde girl said. Uchiha scoffed and proceeded to make his way towards the door. Before he could, however, Machias glared at him and asked, and just where do you think you're going? Were you planning to wander off on your own without saying anything? Uchiha shook his head and said, I have no interest in becoming friends with anyone here. And I'm honestly surprised that you, of all people, give a damn about what I do. Unless you've suddenly decided you do want to keep company with one of those stuck-up hedonists after all. Machias growled angrily at this, but before he could say anything, Naruto spoke up. Juices, that was uncalled for. I get that you aren't exactly fond of Machias or the rest of us even, but that was taking things just a bit too far. You should apologize and the two of you should start working together rather than be at each other's throats for the remainder of this exercise. Can't you put aside your differences and make nice for just a little while? Uchiha scoffed and turned, walking out of the room without another word. Machias, on the other hand, looked at Naruto and frowned for a moment. I can't make nice with nobles. But, thank you. I don't think I got your name yet. Naruto Uzumaki. Nice to officially meet you, Machias. Naruto said as he shook Machias' hand. Without another word, Machias turned and left the room, setting out on his lonesome. Meanwhile, left with the others, Naruto was about to ask if they wanted to set out together, but Fi walked past him and left the room. Blinking a couple of times, Naruto let out a sigh and said, catch you guys and gals later. I'm sticking with Fi-chan. And with that, Naruto left the room and easily caught up to Fi, who appeared to be waiting for him. Don't want to make any friends just yet, Fi-chan. Not really. Fi said with a shrug of her shoulders. Frowning at her, Naruto said, we could use some new friends, Fi-chan. But okay, I'll adhere to your wishes for now. Still, if we're going to be in the same class for the next 2 years, it would be good for us to bond with each other a little more. Fi sighed as she looked up into Naruto's eyes. You're stubborn. Naruto chuckled and said, yep. Then again, you already knew that. Sighing yet again, the petite girl took her boyfriend's hand and began walking with him through the underground labyrinth. As per Fi's wishes, they avoided combat and focused on enjoying a casual stroll through the underground area of the old schoolhouse. Of course, a few monsters did get in their way, but the two of them easily dispatched them. Oh Fi-chan, I wish I knew what to do to help you. You need friends. We both do. Later. Naruto couldn't help but smirk as he hid with Fi behind a couple of pillars. They had already seen Laura, Emma, and Alyssa walk by without noticing them. However, when Rin and company stepped into the room, they couldn't help but smirk as he picked up on their presence. Very good. You actually noticed us. Naruto said as he and Fi revealed themselves before Rin, Gaius, Elliot, and Machias. Good job. Fi said simply with a shrug of her shoulders. You know, even if we weren't trying that hard to be stealthy, it's still impressive that you managed to notice our presence. Good on you, Rin. Naruto said. I see Machias is with you. You okay now, Machias? The green-haired teen nodded and said, I'm doing much better now. Thank you for asking. Do tell me though, why are you two traveling alone down here? It's quite dangerous. The whiskered blonde shrugged and said, it's honestly nothing we can't handle on our own. Let's just say we've been through much worse and leave it at that, shall we? I'm glad to see you're both alright. Rin said, smiling kindly at the duo. Though, I get the feeling that there was absolutely nothing to worry about in the first place. Nope. Fi said. I'm small and quick. These things can't lay a finger on me. And Naruto is Naruto. Enough said there. Naruto chuckled a bit and said, interesting introduction there, Fi-chan. As Rin is already aware, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. This is my girlfriend, Fi Colossal. It's nice to officially meet all of you. You're the last ones to pass through here, you know. Might want to pick up the pace a bit. Fi nodded and said, you're just over halfway through. Keep it up. Later. And with that, Fi rushed towards the wall before jumping up and kicking off of the wall a few times before landing up above. Smirking down at them, she hurried off towards the exit once again. Naruto sighed and scratched the back of his head. Sorry guys, seems she's still not ready for the whole friends thing. She's right though, you're making progress. Keep it up guys. Naruto exclaimed before he casually walked up the wall and hurried off after his girlfriend, chuckling to himself all the while. Well, that was something. Rin said in astonishment. We really didn't need to worry about either of them, did we? Ace chuckled and said, they certainly weren't fibbing when they said they had it handled. Guess we really don't need to worry about them. I have to agree. I'm more convinced than ever that those two know exactly what they're doing. I'm curious about Naruto, but Fi's still a mystery as well. Hopefully we get to know them a bit better during our stay here at the academy. Rin said. It was at this point that something they said registered in Rin's brain. Just over halfway through. Have they both been to the exit and back already? That's insane. Later exit. As Fi and Naruto watched the fighting taking place against a gargoyle-like monster, she looked into his eyes and asked, will you reveal your true form to them? Naruto frowned and shook his head. Not just yet, Fi-chan. I want to know that we can trust them before I do something like that. Fi lightly punched his arm and said, and you say you want to make friends with them. Honesty helps. The blonde sighed and scratched the back of his head for a moment. I know, but you're not trying to make friends yourself. Seems we both need to work on this whole friendship thing. I want to trust them, I really do, but I just don't know if we can yet. I mean, you've seen how Machias has been acting about nobles. Can you imagine what their reactions would be to my true form? Fi frowned, but nodded her head in agreement. We'll need to be careful. But feel free to be yourself with me when we're alone. Of course, sweetheart. Now, what do you say we make a flashy appearance and help destroy that thing? Should be fun. Fi giggled a bit before she and Naruto moved into the room at the same time Jusis did. While Jusis made use of some arts, Naruto and Fi slipped in close to the monster and attacked it from both sides, tearing off its wings in the process. When the beast roared in agony, the members of Class VII suddenly felt more powerful and seemed to be in perfect sync with one another as they went about finishing the beast off with Laura, dealing the finishing blow by cutting off its head. Phew. I think that's the end of it. Emma said. At the very least, that creature doesn't seem like it'll be coming back for a rematch anytime soon. Gaia said. What happened there, anyway? Right at the end of the battle, Elliot said, sounding rather confused. Now that you mention it, I did feel something wash over me for just a second there. Alyssa said. Jusis nodded and said, there was a shimmering veil of blue light surrounding each of us. Was there? I was so preoccupied with the battle that I hardly noticed. Machias admitted. I did notice something as we fought. Perhaps it was just a blur of combat, but I felt like I could see everyone's movements in precise detail. Laura said. Fi shook her head and said, I don't think it was just your imagination. Naruto nodded in agreement and said, in a sense, we were all connected for a brief period of time right at the end there. I think we unconsciously activated a secret function of these Arcus units. Whatever it is, it felt great. That, and we kicked ass. Woot. Fi giggled and took Naruto's hand in hers. You had fun. So did you. Don't deny it. Naruto said, smirking down at her. True. I did. Rin nodded and said, agreed. I have a feeling that what we just experienced was the biggest selling point of the almighty Arcus. Give this man a prize. Sarah exclaimed as she revealed herself to the group. When everyone turned to face her, she said, looks like friendship and teamwork saved the day once again. Naruto and Fi frowned at the friendship comment. If only, Naruto thought sadly. I'm so proud of you guys. Sarah exclaimed, giggling to herself afterwards. Moving so she was standing in front of them, she continued, anyway, that about finishes up today's special orienteering exercise. Seeing the looks on their faces, she pouted cutely and asked, oh, what's with the long faces? I thought you'd all be happy. What are we supposed to be happy about? Machias questioned. I have so many questions, I'm not even sure where to start, Alyssa said as she folded her arms across her chest. Oh? Sarah questioned, a sly smirk on her face. Jusis spoke up at this point. I'll take a stab at it. What exactly is the purpose behind this Class VII? I mean, we get that it's supposed to be some sort of melting pot that includes a broad cross-section of people. Emma started. Laura decided to finish her question for her. But why were the 10 of us chosen in particular? I suppose that is a valid question. There's no single monolithic reason why you all made the list, but if I had to name a major contributing factor, it'd be those Arcus orbments you've got there. Sarah explained. How so? Rin asked as everyone flipped open their Arcus units. Well, like I explained earlier, the Arcus units are developed jointly by the Epstein Foundation and the Reinford Company. Like any battle orbment, they let you use arts, and these have communication functionality built right in. But their crowning feature is what's known as combat linking. That's the phenomenon you all experienced just now. So that's what that was. Alyssa said. Seems like a pretty apt term. It did feel like we were all connected, somehow. Elliot said. Precisely. Doesn't take a genius to imagine how much of an advantage a feature like that would be on a real battlefield. Sarah said. An elite unit that can sense each other's movements, acting in perfect sync, even in the most chaotic conditions, you can hardly put a price on that. It could bring about a revolution in the way wars are fought. Naruto frowned sadly at that and shook his head. I hate war. I never want to see it again. Pai frowned sadly at him and gently squeezed his hand to show her support. Smile, Naruto. For me. Naruto nodded and gently squeezed her hand back. Thanks, sweetheart. It does sound rather. Laura started, only for Pai to pick up on what she was saying. Idealistic. Pai finished for her. Well, yeah. The technology has its limits. Some have a natural aptitude for it. Others just don't. Sarah said with a shrug. And out of this year's fresh batch of bright-eyed students, the 10 of you turned out to have the highest aptitude. And, since aptitude trumps background in Class VII, well here you are. I see. Gaia said. But what gives us this aptitude, though, as compared to our peers? It just seems so random. Machias asked. What, indeed? As promised, if any of you have objections to being in this class, speak now or forever hold your peace. Sarah said before she looked hard into their eyes. I think that pretty much covers the hows and whys of your situation. But this program isn't cheap to run, so we're not about to force anyone into it if they don't want to be here. You should also be aware that Class VI's curriculum will be tougher than any other class's coursework. Just fair warning. So now you know. That leaves you all with an important decision to make. Will you stick with Class VI or not? Naruto frowned and thought for a time and realized that the others weren't quite sure about it either. Right as he was about to step forward and accept, Sarah spoke up again. If you opt out, you'll just be placed in the class you would have been assigned to otherwise. There's no pressure. Nobles will land in Class I or II, commoners in 3IV or V. It's still just the first day, so there's no real catching up you'd have to do. I'm sure you'd fit in just fine. Smirking, Naruto stepped forward and said, I'm in. No matter what Class VI has to throw at me, I'm ready. This is gonna be fun. Green chuckled as he stepped forward and said, I'm in too. Whatever Class VI has to throw at me, I'm game. The others seemed shocked that the two of them already agreed to it. Wait, what? Alyssa exclaimed in shock. Just like that, Elliot asked, somewhat bewildered by what was going on. So you two are first then? Sarah said, grinning at the two of them. I had a feeling it would be the two of you. You both seem pretty sure about it. Any particular reason? Naruto shrugged and said, not really. It honestly sounds like a fun time to me, so I'm all for it. Besides that, I want a place where I truly belong. I get the feeling that Class VI is where I'm meant to be. Green shook his head and said, not really. I just feel like I've put my family out, asking them to send me to this school. So if it gives me more to show for my time here, I'll take whatever opportunities come my way. A noble sentiment. Sarah said as she looked at Green. Afterwards, she glanced at Naruto and said, and that's about what I expected from you. I think you'll fit in just fine in Class VI. You could find true happiness in this class. That's what I'm hoping for, yeah. Naruto said. Count me in as well. Laura said as she stepped forward. The greater the challenge, the more I can push myself to excel. One can't hone a blade without grit, after all. Bea stepped forward next and said, let's make it 4. Considering how far I came to attend this school, it'd be silly to back down before I even started. Well, looks like we've got the country's strongest freshman on board and our foreign exchange student, too. Sarah said before winking at Naruto to let him know that she knew he was far stronger than he let on, thus making him the true strongest freshman. Any more takers? Allow me to take part as well. Emma said as she stepped forward. I was only able to come because of the school's generosity, so I feel it's my duty to help in any way I can. Sign me up too. Elliot exclaimed. I kinda feel like fate brought us here for a reason, you know. And you all seem pretty easy to get along with. And that's a yes from our 2 Orbital staff testers. Though I feel compelled to remind you, your weapons are still in the prototype stage, so on top of your other work, I'll be expecting reports from both of you. Sarah explained. Of course. Emma said, smiling at Sarah. Maybe I spoke too soon. Elliot said as he hung his head. Let me join, too. Alyssa said before stepping forward next to Reen. Oh? There's a surprise. I was almost certain your rebellious streak would see you opt out just on general principle. Sarah teased. It does bother me that you've got us using these Arcus units that are still pretty clearly in development, but if I let every little nitpick like that hold me back, I'd never amount to much. Alyssa said. Haha. Words to live by, right there. Sarah said with a grin. And that brings us to an odd 7. Now, what about you, Phi? Pai shrugged and stepped forward next to her boyfriend. I'm sticking with Naruto. So I'm in. I'm glad to hear it. Sarah said, smiling kindly at the petite girl. We've got a spectacular 8 now, which leaves just the 2 of you. Here, she looked at Usus and Machias, who were standing side by side, oddly enough. I can see you've got issues with each other, but that doesn't mean you can't at least try to work together. Why, if you just look past your differences and embrace the joys of youth, I'm sure you'll become the best of friends." Naruto had a sudden flashback of green spandex, bushy eyebrows, and sparkling teeth. Shuddering, he looked at Sarah and said, "Please don't say youth like that. Brings back horrible memories." Sarah quirked a brow in curiosity, but decided not to question him about it. Instead, she turned to Machias and Juices again. "So? Like hell we will." Machias exclaimed angrily. "The exploitation of the common people by the aristocracy is a blight on every facet of Erebonian life. Unless something is done about it, this country has no future." Sarah's sweat dropped and said, "I appreciate your candor, but I don't think you're going to achieve much by lecturing me about it." Juices shrugged and said, "Well, at least that makes this simple. I, Juices Alberia, claim my place as a member of Class VII." "Huh?" Reen said in disbelief. Why Machias questioned in shock. "You're the son of a duke. Just the thought of being in the same class as commoners should make you sick." Juices sighed and looked coldly into Machias' eyes. "I'll thank you not to tell me how I'm supposed to feel. As far as the House of Alberia is concerned, there's little difference between other nobles and commoners. Besides, this should at least ensure I won't have fools flitting about every day trying to win my favor. That said, I have little interest in getting drawn into your petty arguments on a daily basis, either. I think it would be prudent for us to go our separate ways. I'm certain we can at least agree on this, no?" Machias, ever the stubborn one, shouted, "I don't need some pompous ass who coasts through life on his father's coattails, telling me what to do. I'm in, come hell or high water. You might have had your successes spoon-fed to you up to now, but no outmoded class system is going to hand you trophies anymore. HMPH. We'll see about that," Juices said with a smirk on his face. Naruto sighed and facepalmed himself. "Those two are never going to get along. I can tell that already." Laura nodded and said, "It's a shame, but unless something extreme happens, I worry that they may never see past their differences and get along like they should." Meanwhile, Reen looked at Alyssa and asked, "They're going to be like this pretty much all year, aren't they?" "Sure seems that way. I wouldn't bet on them ever seeing eye to eye," she replied, smiling at Reen. "And by the way, thanks. For before, I mean. I know you saved me earlier when we fell through the trapdoor. Emma told me what you did, so I felt I needed to thank you for it." Reen chuckled a bit and rubbed the back of his head. "I'm just glad you didn't slap me for what happened. Naruto had to move you off of me because we were in a rather awkward position. So in a way, I should be thanking you as well." Alyssa frowned at him and asked, "Weird position? What exactly happened?" Reen sighed and said, "I believe that honesty is a good policy for the most part, so I'll tell you the truth. When I came to, you were lying on top of me with your chest in my face. I was afraid to touch you for fear of what you might do. But Naruto lifted you off of me and laid you against the wall. I'm really sorry." Alyssa narrowed her eyes on him and said, "You're a hopeless pervert, aren't you?" Sighing again, Reen shook his head and said, "Not at all. I only wanted to help you." The blonde girl sighed, but nodded her head in acceptance of that. "Thank you for being honest with me. I appreciate it. But I want you to erase that particular memory from your brain right this instant. I won't have you fantasizing about my breasts." Reen sighed and said, Yeah. I promise." "Good." Alyssa said simply. Now that everyone had finished talking, Sarah clapped her hands and said, "Well, how about that? 10 out of 10. With that, I'd like to congratulate all of you on being the first ever Class VII. I hope you keep those high spirits all year, cause with the workload we've got planned for you, you'll need it." As they all broke down into conversation with one another, Naruto couldn't help but take notice of two people watching them from up above. Deciding not to dwell on it, he returned his attention to his girlfriend and leaned down, capturing her lips with his, much to her embarrassment. "Love you, honey," Naruto said sincerely. "Love you too," Fi said as she snuggled against him. This was just the beginning of their new lives, and they both couldn't wait to see what else this strange journey had in store for them. My Naru. It was now April 17th. For the past few weeks since their orienteering exercise, Naruto had spent a good deal of time learning more about his fellow students, especially those in the red uniforms of Class VII. Each of them were interesting in their own, unique ways, after all. However, he spent more time with Fi than anyone else. After all, he still didn't know if he could trust the others with the truth. He liked them, but after all he had been through, it was only natural to have some trust issues. Now, however, he was staring at himself in the mirror, adjusting his uniform to try and get it just right. He didn't really care about appearances though. What he wanted was to make the damn thing just a bit more comfortable to wear. It didn't help that the outfit didn't have any orange mixed in, which was something of a bummer for him. Shrugging his shoulders after he got a bit more comfortable, he left his room, which was right across the hall from Reen's room. Humming a little tune to himself, he descended the nearby stairs and left the dorm. Fi still hasn't opened up to any of them either. Can't say I blame her though. We do have something of a questionable past, so it's hard to know who you can trust with something like that. As he made his way to school, he passed by a fellow student by the name of Kenneth. As per the usual, he was fishing in the river, a content smile on his face. However, when he spotted Naruto, he waved him down and shouted his name. Shrugging, he descended the stairs to the small pier and asked, "What's up, Kenneth? Everything okay?" Kenneth smiled at Naruto and said, "Everything's perfect, actually. Great weather, a smooth current, and the fish are biting like there's no tomorrow. I just wanted to share in the joys of fishing with a friend. So I got you a present. Why don't you pick it up and give it a try?" Looking down at his feet, Naruto spotted a fishing pole. Lifting it into his hand, Naruto tested the weight a bit and smiled. "Thanks, Kenneth. I really appreciate this. I think I will fish here for a while. I'm curious to see what I can catch here." For a while, Naruto stood with Kenneth, fishing up swordtail after swordtail. Shrugging it off, he soon sealed the fishing pole away into a seal he had inscribed on his jacket. Afterwards, he patted Kenneth on the shoulder and bade him goodbye. As he entered the school grounds, he glanced around at the various buildings, most of which he had already familiarized himself with. Off to the right side, he could see the library and the student union building fairly easily. Beyond that, he knew the engineering club building was right behind the student union building, and even further was the trail that led to the old schoolhouse. On the left, he saw the auditorium. Beyond that was the academy's field where they played lacrosse and enjoyed a bit of horseback riding. In front of him was the main school building. There were 2 floors with a number of classrooms on each. Also inside were a number of the club rooms, the janitor's room, the faculty room, etc. etc. Finally, behind the main building were the courtyard, the garden, with a pond just beyond it, and the gymnasium. Staring up at the top of the main school building, Naruto spotted a rather strange cat watching him closely. Huh. Never seen that cat before. Something's a bit off about it, but I don't have time to dwell on that right now. Gotta get to class. After entering the main building and making his way to the classroom, he spotted most of the others had beaten him to the classroom. Shrugging it off, he took his seat in the back and glanced around at his classmates. He couldn't help but wonder what clubs everyone would be participating in. So far, he hadn't found anything he was really interested in, but he knew he'd have to pick a club soon. Shaking that thought off, he stared at Fi for a time and smiled happily at her. So far, they had been on a few dates in Trista. There weren't a lot of places to go, but they enjoyed their time together very much. Fi had been a bit embarrassed to be seen together in front of other people, but Naruto had assured her that nothing bad was going to happen to either of them if they chose to be affectionate out in public. "I love you very much, Fi-chan. I swear to you, I'll never leave you. Not for anything." Later. As I'm sure you're all well aware, the Erebonian Empire was driven to the brink of collapse roughly 250 years ago. Instructor Thomas began his lecture. This was brought about by the conflict we know as the War of the Lions, a civil war lasting several years, staged over the throne of the late emperor by the most powerful of his potential successors. But of course, I'm not here to tell you that. If I were, I think even young children would be able to pass this course. Rather, I'd like to discuss the effects this had on the empire as members of the aristocracy were drawn into the war. Many hired mercenaries turned to looting and pillaging, and sadly, a similar trend could even be seen among some of the knights. The land was left utterly devastated and morale was at an all-time low. But then, lo and behold, into this nightmare stepped a man. A man that was willing to take a stand against this bloody war of succession. He was a wandering prince who began to rally forces from the outskirts of the empire and would go on to make quite a name for himself. And that name, of course, was Drychel's Rhys Arner. So that name extends all the way back to Drychel's, I knew about Oliver Rhys Arner, Cedric Rhys Arner, and Alfin Rhys Arner. Should have guessed as much, I suppose. You know, I kinda like that name. It's fun. Naruto thought to himself with a quiet chuckle. He would later become known as Drychel's the Lionheart, the 73rd Emperor of Erebonia and father of the Renaissance. Thomas continued. Not to mention the founder of this very academy. Drychel's army was initially rather small in number. But as he traveled across the empire, winning over the hearts of influential sympathizers, his forces rapidly increased. Now, the place where Emperor Drychel's first began gathering his army was. Taking a look around at each of the students, Thomas was at first tempted to call on Rin. However, chancing a glance at Naruto, he decided he would test the enigma a bit. "Naruto Uzumaki. Would you care to tell the class?" Naruto blinked a couple of times as he tried to register the fact that he had just been called on to answer a question. Taking a moment to think it over, he soon had the answer. It was the Nord Highlands, sir. "Very good, Mr. Uzumaki." Thomas exclaimed, clearly happy that Naruto had answered correctly. Prince Dreichel's wanderings led him to the land of Nord, where he lived with the vagabonds for some time. It was there that he heard of the civil war taking place in Erebonia, and those vagabonds of Nord became his very first allies. Woot. Got it right. Naruto thought to himself with a grin. After school. Nice work, everyone. You made it through another grueling day of classes. Sarah exclaimed as she smiled at her students. In case you've been living under a rock, please don't forget that tomorrow is your first free day. It's not technically a day off, there are no classes, so it's really up to you what to do with your time. Why, you could go shopping in the capital if you want to. Or just do what I do and sleep all day. Sleep is so wonderful. Naruto chuckled and said, you know something, instructor? You are awesome. I swear, you remind me so much of freezing. As he realized he was about to speak about something in his past, he glanced away and scratched the tip of his nose. Sorry. Forget I said anything. The others looked at Naruto strangely, wondering what he was trying to hide. Deciding not to dwell on it, Emma looked at Sarah and asked, will the academy's facilities still be open for our use? Yes, I'd like to be able to use the free study area in the library, myself. Machia said. Of course. This school shuts down for no one, so feel free to patronize any and all facilities as you like. Sarah said, though she couldn't help but look at Naruto strangely for a time. What were you about to say, Naruto? Shaking it off, she turned back to the others and said, a lot of clubs have meet scheduled for these free days as well, so anyone who's joined one should probably check on that. I see. Gaia said, clearly thinking about the club he was joining. I'll be certain to do so. Laura said. She had already decided on a club to join as well, it would seem. Also, before you leave, we should go over what's happening next week. Sarah said. On Wednesday, you all have your practical exam. A practical exam? Reen wondered aloud. It was obvious that not one of them knew what the hell a practical exam entailed, and a few of them really didn't like the sound of it. What does that entail, exactly? Alyssa asked for not just herself, but the class as a whole. It's part of your combat training. You'll be graded on your performance, so make sure you're well rested and ready for battle by then. Might be a good idea to do some training on your own time, too, just to keep from getting rusty. Sarah explained. Interesting. Juice said, more to himself than anyone else. Elliot looked nervous as he said, I definitely don't like the sound of that. I just yawned, not at all caring about the upcoming exam. Seeing this caused Naruto to chuckle a bit. Fai-chan, never change. Oh, and one more thing. After the practical exam is over, I've got another important announcement about a major part of Class VI's curriculum that I kinda sorta haven't mentioned at all yet. What? Machias asked. Naruto smirked as he wondered about the possibilities of this hidden part of their curriculum. Ooh, this should be nifty. I like it already. So, whatever you choose to do on your free day, make it count for something. That concludes today's homeroom. Machias, if you'll do the honors. Sarah said. Yes, instructor. All rise, Bo. Machias said to end the day of classes. Afterwards, Sarah left the room, as did a number of the other students of Class VI. Naruto watched as Fi left the room, but didn't chase after her. Instead, he chanced to glance at Reen and his friends, Elliot and Gaius. I wonder, what will you choose to do with your time? I'm a little worried about that practical exam next week. Elliot admitted. I mean, I'm still just getting used to this staff. I'd be happy to help you train if you need a sparring partner. Reen offered. The gymnasium looks big enough that I'm sure we'd have no trouble finding a good spot for it. That's very kind of you to offer. But I was planning on attending club practice today. Elliot said in response. Oh, you've joined a club already? Which one did you pick? Reen asked. I decided to try for the band. Elliot said, sounding a tad embarrassed, though he really had no reason to be. Though, I'm not sure how much use they'll have for a violinist. I didn't know you played the violin. Did you just pick it up for fun? Reen asked. Naruto shook his head and said, no, it's more than that. You play more than just the violin, don't you, Elliot? If I had to fathom a guess, I'd say you're quite the talented musician, though it's obvious you don't think too highly of yourself. You should have more confidence in yourself, Elliot. On and off the battlefield. Besides that, you're a valued member of Class VI. If nothing else, just know that I'll always have your back. Okay, Elliot. Elliot blinked and asked, how do you know I play multiple instruments? The blonde shrugged and said, partly from how you talk about music, even if you didn't say much. Partly because I can see it in your posture and from your hands. You've practiced on the violin a lot, and I'm willing to bet you've learned to play a number of other instruments as well. However, there is something else. However, I think I'll have that remain a secret, for the time being at least. Elliot pouted and said, well, now you've got me curious. I wonder what you're hiding. Naruto chuckled and said, maybe I'll tell you all someday. How about you, Gaius? what are you up to? Yeah, Gaius. Have you joined any of the school's clubs? Elliot asked. I'm considering joining the art club, Gaius said. Art, huh? Somehow, that's not what I pictured for you. No pun intended, Reen said. I dunno. From what little I know about Gaius here, I'd say he's got an artistic soul. Should be interesting to see what he decides to paint. Naruto said as he looked Gaius up and down for a moment. I bet you're quite the artist, aren't you Gaius? Do you have any artistic experience? Elliot asked him. I dabbled in it back home. Taught myself though, so I feel like this could be a good chance to learn proper technique, Gaius explained. Wow. That's pretty cool. Elliot exclaimed excitedly. I'd love to see some of your work sometime, Reen said. It was at this point that the classroom door swung open and Instructor Sarah walked back inside. Approaching Reen's desk, she looked between him and Naruto. Oh, good. You're still here. Instructor? Reen asked. Is there a problem? Elliot questioned. No. I was just hoping someone could do a teensy little favor for me. There's something I need picked up from the student council room, Sarah explained. Something you need picked up? Elliot asked. What would that be? Gaius questioned. That's for me to know and you to find out. All I'll say is, it's something absolutely essential to your school life. And somebody needs to go get it. Though it doesn't matter who. Any volunteers? Sarah asked. Reen and Naruto spoke up at the same time. I'll go. Looking at each other, they chuckled. Maybe the both of us should go? Reen questioned. Naruto shrugged before looking at Sarah again. If we show up at the student council room and tell them you sent us, they'll know why we're there, right? Wait, are you sure you don't mind? Elliot and Gaius questioned. Reen shrugged and said, you two have clubs to go to, right? I'm still totally undecided, so this shouldn't be a big deal at all. I can look in on a few clubs myself along the way, in fact. Naruto nodded in agreement. He's right. We'll take a look around, pop in and check out some of the clubs, see what's what really. We'll either find a club that interests us, or we could do something like help out the student council if need be. Whatever works. Well, if you really don't mind, Elliot said. Thank you. Both of you. Gaius said sincerely. The student council room is in the student union building next door, at the end of the hall on the second floor. Sarah explained. It's open until quite late, so there's no rush. Thank you, my dears. I leave everything in your capable hands. Reen sweat dropped and said, oh okay then. Naruto chuckled quietly to himself as he watched Sarah walk back up to the podium and began to rifle around. Yep, you are definitely this world's version of Anko. I really need to talk with you alone sometime. I'm sure we'll get along great. After Elliot and Gaius vacated the room, Naruto looked at Reen and said, you know, you don't have to come with me if you'd rather check out some of the clubs. I don't really have any clubs in mind at the moment, myself. Like I said, I might just decide to help out the student council on my time off. Reen shook his head and said, I can't decide on one either. Let's take a look around and see what the clubs are like though, just to be safe. If we can't decide on anything, maybe we really should join the student council, huh? Naruto shrugged and said, whatever works. Come on Reen, let's go have some fun. Reen chuckled to himself and left the room, waiting on Naruto to join him. Naruto, however, walked up to Sarah and decided to speak to her. Instructor Sarah, what exactly are you still doing here? I figured you'd have left by now. Sarah sweat dropped as she looked into Naruto's eyes. Don't tell anyone, but I actually left the student register in here and forgot all about it. Good thing I remembered, though, otherwise I would have had to sit through another of the vice principal's lectures. Naruto chuckled and said, yeah, he seems like a real bloward. I'm not exactly a fan of his. Sarah giggled a bit before she turned serious. Naruto, who do I remind you of? You started saying something earlier, but you stopped yourself. Is it someone from your past that you don't want anyone to know about? Naruto sighed and shook his head. You remind me of a woman named Anko Mitarashi. She was a lot like you, instructor. I haven't seen her in a few years though. I don't even know if she's alive and well. She was a dear friend and I miss her. I try not to think about my old life because it's just depressing. Still, I think you and Anko would have been really good friends. Trust me when I say you and Anko would pretty much be like looking in a mirror. You two look a lot alike, only with different hair colors, different styles, small stuff like that. I swear, sometimes when I look at you, I have to remind myself that you aren't Anko. Sarah frowned and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Naruto, you're going to need to talk to somebody about your past at some point. You can't keep it all bottled up forever. It's not healthy for you. Naruto simply shrugged and said, we'll see. Before he turned and left the room, joining Reen in the hallway. When he asked if Naruto was ready to go, the blonde nodded and said, sure thing. Once he was gone, Sarah frowned and thought quietly to herself, Naruto, just what happened to you in your past? All I really know for certain is that you're not from Erebonia and you're powerful. Insanely so. Can't say I know much else. Naruto. Rin and Naruto passed the other first-year classrooms, which were somewhat ironically on the second floor, whereas the second-year classrooms were on the first floor. After rounding the corner, they approached a blonde girl ahead of them by the name of Razine. She turned and asked them, "Have you two decided on what club you want to join?" "I'm considering focusing my time on extracurricular activities during our free days, myself. Hopefully we can all make the most of our free day tomorrow." Naruto blinked and said, "That's right. We don't have to join a club, do we? Extracurricular activities, huh? Sounds like that could be pretty fun. I'll have to think on that." Rin chuckled softly and said, "Have to admit, taking the day off to relax and do something not related to schoolwork could be just what we need." As they prepared to enter the room nearby, they spotted a rather fat noble girl standing outside a nearby room, her mouth practically watering at the delectable smell pouring forth from the room beyond. "Oh, my. What a delectable smell." She could be heard muttering to herself. "It seems to be coming from the cooking club. Perhaps I should follow my nose and grace them with my presence." Sweat dropping, the duo decided to just leave her to it and entered the room behind them, which just so happened to belong to the wind orchestra. Off to the side they could see Elliot doing something, but they decided against disturbing him for the time being. Instead, they approached the duo standing at the front of the room and got the attention of the boy. "My name's Hebel, and before you joke that my name rings a bell, I'm head of the wind orchestra. The name's a bit misleading, though, since we focus on more than just percussion and wind instruments. If your interest lies in strings or something, we'd still be more than happy to have you. If you'd like to join, just stop by whenever you can." "Huh, sounds like they're pretty varied in what they do. Sounds interesting. I'll have to think on it. I've never played an instrument before, but it would certainly be fun to learn how. We shall see," Naruto said with a shrug of his shoulders. Rin looked at him and asked, "Are you sure you want to join the wind orchestra? You can only join one club, right? Unless you think you can somehow manage all of them." Naruto looked into Rin's eyes with a smirk. Holding up a single-hand seal, he said, "Shadow clone jutsu." In an instant, a small army of clones popped into existence, crowding the room and freaking everyone out. Dispelling them little by little, he grinned at Rin and said, "Of course I could participate in all of them. I can be everywhere at once." Rin and the others in the room blinked in shock at what they had just seen. Elliot hurried over to him and asked, "What the heck did you just do? That's not like any art I've ever seen." The blonde simply chuckled and said, "Let's just say I'm not your average human being and leave it at that for now. Point stands that I can be wherever I want to be. And I think learning to play an instrument would be a lot of fun. Now, we'll leave you all alone. It's time to go and check out the cooking club." Rin nodded dumbly and followed Naruto out of the room. "Those clones of yours, do you learn what they do, or are they just for show?" The whiskered teen looked at Rin and said, "Whatever my clones learn, I learn the moment they dispel. So if one of them learns how to play a drum or the piano or something, I'll learn what they learn. It's a useful jutsu, wouldn't you agree?" Rin nodded again and said, "Makes sense. Though now I'm just curious to know more about you. You won't tell me anything though, will you?" "Right you are, Rin. Now come on, let's go see what the cooking club's all about, huh? Besides the obvious, of course," Naruto said as he walked past Margarita and opened the door. Once inside, they spotted Instructor Mary towards the back of the room. Ignoring her for the time being, the duo approached Nicholas and struck up a conversation with him. "Hello, and welcome to the cooking club. Whether you want to learn the essentials of cooking or research new, exciting dishes, this is the club for you. You should definitely join if this whets your appetite." "I'd love to join, but I'm afraid I don't really know how to cook anything. I can cook simple dishes, but nothing grand. Besides that," Naruto said, glancing over his shoulder at the door. Nicholas nodded and said, "I sense an unstoppable force lurking just outside the clubroom. Haha. Perhaps it's a new member just waiting to make their entrance." "Be it, you could say it like that, I suppose. Or you could call it what it is and say that there's a ravenous beast out there waiting to sink her claws into not just food, but suitable marriage candidates," Naruto said, shivering in horror at the imagery running through his mind. Rin chuckled nervously and said, "It can't really be that bad, can it?" Naruto looked into Rin's eyes with a deadpan stare. "You have no idea. I once knew a guy that was so popular, his fangirls were like ravenous beasts hungry for his sperm. Yeah, you don't want to think about it, trust me. I'll take your word for it. I could also do without the imagery," Rin said, sweat dropping afterwards. Approaching Instructor Mary at this point, they decided to strike up a conversation with her. "Oh, hello there. You're Class VII students, are you not? My name is Mary. I'm the cooking club's advisor. Were you hoping to join?" "I'm afraid not. We're just trying to familiarize ourselves with the campus," Rin said apologetically. Mary giggled a bit and said, that's fine. I happen to be the advisor for the art club and the wind orchestra, too. If you're interested in joining either of them, we'll be sure to welcome you with open arms. Cool. I'm considering joining the wind orchestra and I'm interested in art as well, so we'll see. Naruto said, smiling at the kind-hearted instructor. Mary smiled at him before saying, you know, it's only been 2 weeks since I started as an instructor here. I suppose you could say I'm something of a first year myself. I hope that this year can be a learning experience for all of us. And of course, please don't hesitate to let me know if you wish to join any of the clubs I look over. If you're really interested in joining either the wind orchestra or the art club, I'd love to have you. What was your name again? The whiskered teen smiled at her and said, Naruto Uzumaki, ma'am. It's really nice to officially meet you. It's nice to meet you too. Mary said. Remember, my door is always open. Thanks instructor. Goodbye for now. We've got stuff we need to take care of. Naruto said before he turned and left the room with Rin. This time, the duo walked down the hall a bit and entered the art club's clubroom. They immediately took notice of Gaius, who appeared to be painting something on his canvas. However, Naruto couldn't help it as he took notice of a rather beautiful pink-haired girl sitting near Gaius, painting something herself. Blushing slightly, he was actually a bit shy about approaching her. Seeing this, Rin frowned in confusion and asked, Naruto. What's wrong? Don't tell me you're interested in her. Don't you have Phi? Naruto quickly shook his head to snap himself out of his daze. Looking into Rin's eyes, Naruto rubbed the back of his head and said, yeah, but it's something of an open relationship. Sort of. It's hard to explain. Maybe I'll explain it to you later. For now, let's introduce ourselves. Rin frowned in confusion for a time before he eventually chose to shrug it off. Approaching the pink-haired girl, Rin said, hey. The girl, whose name was Lind, looked between them for a moment before saying somewhat unsurely, I wonder if joining this club was a mistake. Clara's supposed to be the head of the club, but she's so caught up in her own work, she won't teach us anything. Then there's Gaius, who seems a little hard to approach. I shouldn't be so quick to judge, though. Maybe I just need to take the initiative and talk to them. That's perfect. I just need to get to know everyone tomorrow, maybe. Naruto chuckled softly and said, take your time. There's no rush. You have 2 years here to figure everything out and make friends with people, your fellow club members included. If it helps any, I think I'll join as well. I don't know a lot about art, but I'm always happy to learn. Maybe you could teach me something sometime, huh? Lind blushed a bit and said, that sounds nice. You're a member of Class VII, right? I'm Lind, a member of Class IV. It's nice to meet you. Naruto Uzumaki. It's very nice to meet you as well, Lind. I hope we can become good friends. Naruto said, smiling at her. That sounds wonderful, Naruto. Lind replied. Afterwards, Naruto and Rin walked to Gaius's side and looked at his canvas. It seemed that he was working on a landscape painting of some kind, though it was in its early stages, and they couldn't quite tell what it was he was painting. I'm creating art while I'm surrounded by art. Being able to paint in a place like this is an invaluable experience. Definitely not something I was able to enjoy back home. Gaius said to them. Naruto smiled kindly at the tall teen and patted him gently on the shoulder. You do you, big guy. I'm looking forward to seeing what you create here. I just hope I can draw or paint something half as decent. He said with a chuckle. Afterwards, they walked over to the club leader Clara. Before they could even say anything to her, she glanced at them and said, I guess we have new members all of a sudden. Well, bully for them. I've got my own art to focus on. Rin and Naruto both sweat-dropped before Rin leaned over and whispered to Naruto, shouldn't a club head be a bit more friendly? Or at least kind of welcoming? Naruto shrugged and said, heck if I know. At least she's dedicated to her art. That's something, at the very least. Rin shrugged as well, but didn't say anything more. Instead, he walked out of the room and waited for Naruto to join him. As he made to leave the room, Naruto stopped and turned to Lind, waving at her with a smile on his face. Afterwards, without another word, he joined Rin outside and together they made their way to the rooftop to see if anyone was up there worth talking to. Upon reaching the rooftop, they looked around and spotted Phi. Walking up to her, Rin asked, what are you doing up here, Phi? Phi looked from Rin to Naruto and then back again. The short answer? Being bored. Rin sweat-dropped and said, that's not exactly what I meant. Are you planning on joining any clubs? How about we help you look hard? Too much work. Phi said before yawning. Rin sweat-dropped again, but didn't say anything. Instead, Phi looked out over the railing and said, nice view up here. I might come here when I'm bored. Naruto chuckled and stepped up beside his girlfriend. I might just join you. He said with a grin. Can't let my girlfriend be bored all the time, now can I? Damn right. Phi said with a smirk aimed in his direction. You go have fun. You're busy, right? Naruto shrugged and said, yeah. Rin and I are looking around, taking in the sights, and trying to see if any of the clubs interest us. Sarah's also got us acting as little errand boys. We've got to go see the student council about picking up something or whatever. Then go. Don't keep them waiting forever. Fi said. Sure. Love you, sweetie. Naruto said before kissing his girlfriend's lips. Afterwards, he and Rin descended the stairs down to the first floor of the main building. Glancing around, they ignored the receptionist and proceeded towards a noble and his maid. The noble seemed to be chatting up a short green-haired girl. Upon getting a closer look at her, Naruto frowned for a moment and thought, she reminds me of Fu. Whoever this girl is, she's very pretty. Upon noticing them, the girl, whose name was Mint, turned to them and said, I was just trying to get to my club when this weirdo started harassing me. All I wanted was for someone to tell me where the music room is. Do you know? Naruto frowned as he looked at Vincent, the noble. After a brief moment, he looked back into Mint's eyes and said, I do. It's on the second floor on the eastern side of the building. If you go up the stairs right over there and take a left, it'll be the first room on your right. A buddy of ours is joining the wind orchestra as well. He's got orange hair and his name is Elliot. I'm sure that if you talk to him, you'll really enjoy his company. Okay. Mint smiled happily at him and hugged him tight. Yay. Thank you so much. I still don't know my way around this academy. I'm Mint, by the way. Who are you? Gently hugging her back, he smiled and said, Naruto Uzumaki. It's really nice to meet you, Mint. Now run along. I'm just going to have a chat with this fellow. Hopefully we see each other around more often, Mint-chan. The green-haired girl nodded and thanked him again before running off in search of the music room. The moment she ran off, the noble reached out a hand and shouted, wait. Come back. When she disappeared up the stairs, he turned a fierce glare onto Naruto and said, look at what you did, you low-class buffoon. Naruto smiled sinisterly at him and said, you know, girls don't appreciate a random guy walking up to them and harassing them. You might think you were just being nice, but your advances on her were creeping her out. Believe me though, I get it. A school full of beautiful women and you can't help but want to get to know them on a more personal level. That's why I'm not going to kick your ass. No, instead I'll make you this promise. Keep harassing girls like that and I'll prank you so bad you'll be afraid to talk to anyone ever again for fear of what might happen to you. Do you understand me? Vincent sweated nervously and nodded his head rapidly. Clearly. I'll behave. Good. Naruto said with a kind smile on his face. Come on, Rin, let's continue on our merry tour. As Naruto walked off, Rin sweat-dropped and thought, note to self. Never piss off Naruto Uzumaki. And with that, he hurried off to catch up to his classmate. Entering the janitor's room, they approached the man and listened as he said, heh, new students huh? Well, if you're ever in need of advice, just stop on by. I'll help you in any way I can. Even if you bust a window or three, you can let me know. I won't get after you too much. Rin chuckled and said, alright. You'll be the first to know if I start endangering the school's glass. The kind janitor, a man by the name of Jaeger, chuckled a bit before saying, Thor's has a long history behind it, so you can be it's got a lot of rules. Wouldn't hurt you new students to give your student notebook a good once over. If you know the rules, you're less likely to break them. Good advice. We'll be sure to memorize the school rules. I'd rather not get suspended or something. Naruto said before he and Rin left the room to venture to the other side of the building. This time, they went to the nurse's office where the school physician, an elderly woman by the name of Beatrix, was currently working. Well, hello there. Welcome to the infirmary. You two seem quite a bit healthier than our average visitor. Ho ho. Well, classes are over for the day, so feel free to relax here if you'd like. Beatrix said, smiling kindly at the two of them. Thank you for the offer. Rin said. It might be nice to just come and relax once in a while. It seems peaceful in here. Leaving the infirmary, they headed into the faculty lounge to see who might be in there to chat with. The first person they saw was Instructor Makarov, their Orbal and Natural Sciences teacher. You're from Class VII, right? Makarov asked. Must be one weird class if stopping by the faculty lounge is how you spend your free time. Rin chuckled and said, we're just coming to grips with the academy's layout. Cool. Anyway, just do me a favor and try not to fail any of your tests. I really don't want to think of new stuff for retests, and if nobody fails, I won't have to. Makarov said with a dismissive shrug of the shoulders. Naruto and Rin both sweat-dropped at this. You might not want to say that too loudly, considering your position, Rin said. Shrugging it off, Makarov looked between the two of them and asked, you know Mint from Class 3, she's my niece. She's a good kid, but wherever she goes, chaos follows. I should probably go make sure she hasn't set herself on fire. Then, as if he realized something, a look of dread washed over Makarov's face. And she's gonna be here for 2 whole years. Mint? That cute girl with green hair? She seems so sweet though. Naruto said, sounding a bit puzzled. Seeing Makarov nod, Naruto chuckled somewhat nervously and said, well, this should be an interesting 2 years at least. Right. Makarov simply looked horrified at the prospects, so the duo left him to himself and proceeded to go and speak to Instructor Thomas, the only other occupant in the room. Seeing the two of them, Thomas exclaimed, if it isn't Rin Schwarzer and Naruto Uzumaki. What brings you two here? Oh, don't tell me you wanted to learn more about the War of the Lions. Well, that's just fine by me. Allow me to be your guide through the hectic history of the Middle Ages. As luck would have it, I just so happen to have 5 or so hours to spare today. That should be enough for a cursory primer. Thank you for the offer, but we wouldn't want to bother you, Rin said nervously as he began to back away. Oh, what a shame, now I really want to tell someone about the War of the Lions. I suppose my authentic Eastern Hinua statue will have to do, Thomas said, sounding rather disappointed. Deciding to leave him to it, Rin and Naruto left the faculty lounge and proceeded to go next door to the principal's office. However, along the way, they ran into Vice Principal Heinrich, who Naruto was not fond of at all. You there? HMPH. You're members of Class VII, are you not? Listen here. Contrary to the tainted image your instructor has provided you, this is a highly distinguished academy. You can see this exemplified by our upper-class students, whose noble behavior you would do well to learn by. Take heed of their every action and mannerism. Do you see them running in the corridors? No, you do not. Understood. Heinrich lectured. Rin wisely chose to remain quiet, but Naruto glared into the man's eyes and said, not all nobles are as perfect as you make them sound, Vice Principal. And Sarah's a great instructor. I like her and I'm glad she's our instructor. But enough about that. We've been asked to meet with the student council, so we'll just be on our way now. Goodbye. Heinrich didn't like Naruto's attitude or what he insinuated about him, but he decided against doing anything to punish the teenager. Instead, he simply huffed and continued his patrol of the school's corridors. Once they had left the main academy building, Naruto grumbled irritably to himself and said, I cannot stand that windbag. He's like the king of all douchebags. What a funking slimeball. Rin patted Naruto on the shoulder and said, you showed more restraint than Machias would have. Let's just do our best to leave that guy alone from now on. I'd rather not bother with him unless we absolutely have to for some reason. Agreed. Naruto said before he walked with Rin towards 2 students in green uniforms standing a short distance away from them. Their names were Hugo and Becky. Hey there, Becky. Have you decided on a club to join yet? Becky said, here, how many times day I need to tell ye to stop acting like you're my mate. HMPH, I'm joining the school store. Got a problem? Why that? Hugo chuckled and said, Becky, that's not a club at all. I know. You think I'm daft or something? Becky exclaimed in frustration. As usual, you continue to baffle me and presumably everyone else. Hugo replied, sounding genuinely confused. Afterwards, he turned to face Rin and Naruto and said, I'm attending the academy from my home in Heimdallr. A commute like that makes it very difficult to join a club or work a part-time job like Becky does. I bet. Naruto said before looking at Becky. You've got quite the accent. I kinda like it. He said with a thumbs up. Why thank ye. Here, ye know that massive corporation Cleaston Company well, this wee bam's fey there. He thinks he's a pure ticket cause his family's well off. He willn't stop following me about either. Actually dayin' my heat in. Aye, you go have a wee giggle while your family's money. Meanwhile, I'll go get a job and make my own money. Can't he waste the good academy life, now? She exclaimed, pointing a finger in Hugo's face. While Rin looked a bit confused thanks to her interesting accent, Naruto chuckled a bit and said, sounds like you've got quite the academy life ahead of you, Becky. Take care and try to have some fun, okay? He said before turning and walking off with Rin toward the academy field. As they approached the field, they saw an orange-haired guy with a checkered cap on his head. Approaching him, they listened as he said, whoa, there. Those ladies in the lacrosse get-ups are looking mighty fine. It'd be a crime against photography if I didn't snap some pics. Man, this academy's the place to be if you're looking for cute girls. Yeah. I'm gonna be late to the photography club, but when inspiration strikes, you can't just ignore it. Naruto deadpanned at the teen before rearing back his fist and clocking him in the back of the head, causing him to lurch forward, nearly dropping his camera. Hey. The hell was that for? Rex exclaimed angrily. Don't snap pics of girls without their permission. Get their consent before you start snapping pics, otherwise you'll just come across as a massive pervert. I doubt you want them to think of you like that. Naruto said. Rex simply blinked before saying, I am a pervert though. Most people are to some extent. You got a problem with that? The blonde sighed and palmed his face. Great. Jiraiya, you should have taken this guy as your apprentice. He's an unashamed pervert, just like you. Leaving the guy to his own devices, Naruto and Rin proceeded down to the field and made way towards the riding club first, where they met a second-year noble by the name of Lambert. "Welcome to the riding club. I'm the current captain, Lambert Mock, and this is my trust steed, Whitcomb. Are you new recruits, by any chance? If you've the slightest interest in joining, by all means, please do," Lambert suggested, a grin on his face. "Sorry, it's not really my thing," Naruto admitted. "What about you, Rin?" Rin shrugged and said, "I like riding horses, but I'm afraid this isn't exactly the club for me. My apologies." Lambert simply smiled and shrugged it off. "Not a problem at all. If you know anyone that might be interested in the club, just send them my way." "Sure thing, Lambert. Catch you later," Naruto said before he turned and walked towards the lacrosse club members. Once there, the two of them saw Emma and Alyssa standing there, though it looked as if Emma was more than a tad uncomfortable. A purple-haired noble girl was standing behind them, glaring at the back of Alyssa's head. "So, that's the Alyssa girl I've heard so much about. She has a different air about her than the other first years. She's awfully beepy for a commoner. She intends to join the lacrosse club, does she? What a lovely turn of events. I can use this to teach her her place," the girl, whose name is Ferris, said to herself. Naruto leaned close to Rin and whispered, "Goody. Another of those arrogant noble types. How pleasant." Rin chuckled and said, "She's not quite as bad as some nobles I've met, at least." Naruto shrugged and said, "You've got a point there." Looking at Alyssa, they heard her say, "Well, she's passionate, to say the least. Joining a sports team does seem like it'd be interesting, though. Friendship, hard work, and success, huh? I've never joined any sports teams before, but they must be pretty fun if she's this excited." Deciding to leave her be, they approached Emma, who turned to speak to them as soon as they entered her line of sight. "Alyssa and I are taking a look at all the clubs here. Would you care to join us? I'm not much for sports, myself. I think something like the literature club would be the best fit for me." Naruto shook his head and said, "We'd love to join you too, but we kind of have to be somewhere sometime soonish. We were asked to go to the student council room and pick something up. At the moment though, we're just having a look around to see the sights and check out all the clubs. I've seen a few that I'm interested in, but I haven't quite decided yet. We'll see though." Emma smiled at him and said, "Well, I hope you two have fun, whatever you decide to do. Do take care." "Of course. Let's go, Rin. We do have stuff to do," Naruto said before he walked off with Rin to continue their tour of the campus. As they approached the gymnasium, they stumbled upon a boy named Monk who was mumbling to himself. I wonder if I can find any good material for this month." Upon spotting them, he said, "Oh, don't mind me just talking to myself. I do that sometimes. Actually, Class VII might just end up being a treasure trove of material. Heh. I've got a feeling your class will provide me with some good material. You better not let me down. Heh." Naruto sweat dropped and said, "I don't even want to know what this material is you're referencing. Instead, I'm going to back away slowly. Goodbye." And with that, he turned and entered the gymnasium, hoping to put some distance between himself and Mr. Creepy. Once inside, they spotted a rather beautiful red-headed girl looking at a nearby bulletin board. Approaching her, they listened as she said, "I guess this is where the fencing and swimming clubs are located. I'm not exactly what you'd call athletic, but it might still be worth checking them both out. I mean, we're at a military academy and all. There's not much point in being here if I'm not healthy." "I'd admit, you've got a point," Naruto said. "Still, I'm not one for fencing or swimming, so I'll have to pass on those clubs. What about you, Rin? You interested in either of them?" "I think Jusis would probably be a good fit for the fencing club." Rin shook his head and said, "I'm not really interested in either club, to be honest." "You're right though, Jusis would be a good fit for the fencing club." Shrugging, they entered the fencing club's clubroom and watched for a little while before approaching the nearby blonde girl, whose name was Paula. "What's with that guy? What, does he think he's hot stuff just because he's a noble? I've never been able to get along with jerks like that. Can't see that changing anytime soon, either. He's been preening even more than the other upper class first years. Guess I won't be joining this club after all. That's a shame. If you enjoy fencing, it sucks that one pompous asshole would turn you off of it. Sorry to hear that," Naruto said, patting her gently on the shoulder. Turning, he watched as the noble, an arrogant prick named Patrick Hyams, spoke to the vice president of the fencing club. Deciding to simply ignore the argument taking place between them, he looked at Rin and said, "Let's go." "I've gotta admit, even if I was interested in fencing, a jerk like that just ruins the whole thing." Rin nodded and left the room with Naruto, not wanting to be around Mr. High and Mighty. Walking to the indoor swimming pool, they immediately took notice of Laura and a couple of boys, one of them wearing some swimming trunks. Fascinating," Laura said. "I suppose there are some things we can only do while we're students. It looks like there's a lot I could learn in this club." I'm going to fill out an application this very instant. As the image of Laura in a swimsuit filled their brains, the duo blushed a bit and quickly shook it off. Okay, need to do something else. Laura in a swimsuit sounds way too nice. Naruto thought before quickly turning around and leaving the gymnasium, Rin hot on his heels. Afterwards, they went to enter the garden nearby, but Naruto spotted a familiar face sitting on one of the benches in the courtyard. Is that Lind? No. They look alike, but they're different. Must be twins. Naruto said as he approached the girl. Hi there. The girl, whose name was Vivi, looked up into his eyes and said, a year seems like a long time, but it'll fly by if you waste it all studying. It was hard work getting into this academy, so we deserve to have some fun while we're here. Now, if I were something fun to do, where would I hide? Naruto's sweat dropped and asked, you're a prankster at heart, aren't you? Vivi giggled and said, yep. I can tell, you're just like me, aren't you? The name's Vivi. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Tall and Handsome. Naruto chuckled softly and said, yep. I used to love pulling all kinds of pranks on people back home. I haven't pulled a good prank in a long time though. Kind of unfortunate, really. Still, I'm a prankster at heart and I wouldn't have it any other way. The name's Naruto Uzumaki, by the way. Nice to meet you, Vivi-chan. The pink-haired girl smiled at him and said, looking forward to seeing you around, Naruto. Take care. Naruto and Rin walked into the garden at this point, looking around at all the pretty flowers. A noble girl by the name of Edel approached them and said, it might seem a little quaint, but gardening is both fun and enriching. We'd love to have you join our club if you have so much as a budding interest. I'll teach you everything there is to know about plants. The more love you pour into your flowers, the better they'll grow. Feel free to join our club if you want to cultivate a green thumb. Naruto smiled as he looked at all the flowers. I used to have a small garden back where I'm from. Can't exactly call it home anymore, but I did enjoy raising my garden. You know what? I think I'll join this club too. That makes the wind orchestra, the art club, and the gardening club so far. Guess I'll be making good use of the shadow clone jutsu after all. Edel tilted her head, looking slightly confused. Shrugging it off, she said, it will be nice to have you with us. My name is Edel. You are? Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. It's nice to meet you, Edel. Likewise, Naruto. I look forward to having you with us. Edel said before she watched as Naruto and Rin left to continue their exploration of the campus. This time, they bypassed the engineering club building, which was currently closed, and passed the student union building as well. Venturing to the library, they paused when they saw Machias standing outside. Arg. Why is he in there? What's wrong? Rin asked. Naruto sighed and said, Jusis is in there, isn't he? Machias flinched, but didn't say anything in response. Instead, he grumbled a bit and proceeded to leave, heading back towards the dorm. Seeing this, Naruto sighed and shook his head in mild disbelief. I honestly didn't think his hatred of nobles would be this bad. Why do I get the feeling it's only going to get worse between them before things start getting better? Because I feel the same way. We'll just have to deal with it when it happens and hope for the best. Rin said before he led the way into the library. Upon entering the building, the first thing they saw was large bookshelves filled with all kinds of books. Glancing up at the second floor, they could make out some study desks and even taller bookshelves. The next thing they noticed was Jusa sitting at one of the tables reading a book of some kind. Looks like you were right. Rin said. I usually am. Naruto said with a chuckle. Wanna go say hi? Rin shook his head and said, nah. Let's leave him alone. He deserves to enjoy a good book by himself. If you say so. Naruto said with a shrug of his shoulders. Not really sure what else to do here, so let's go to the student union building. Sound good? Rin nodded his head in agreement. Let's. And with that, they left the library and ventured next door to the student union building. Before they could enter, they heard someone call out to them. Hey there, first years. The figure said in greeting. Turning to face whomever it was that had just greeted them, Naruto's eyes narrowed as warning bells went off in his head. Something not right about this guy. He's a dangerous one. Rin started hesitantly. How's it going? The second-year student asked. Academy life been treating you well this past half month? Oh. Yeah, it has. It's not easy, but I'm managing. Mostly. Though I have a feeling it's only going to get harder from here on out. Rin replied. Naruto looked hard into the second year's eyes, but rather than say anything and make his suspicions known, he smiled and said, yeah, things have been great so far, aside from a few bad apples. They seem to crop up everywhere you go, I swear. The second year chuckled and said, yeah, I hear ya. And looking at Rin at this point, he said, of course it will. Your class is going to be more intense than the others, too. But you just hang in there, okay? Oh okay. Wait. You're a second-year student, aren't you? Do you mind if I ask your name? Rin asked. Hey, now. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. First things first. How about you let me show you this cool trick I've been practicing? The second-year student asked with a sly grin on his face. Trick? Rin questioned unsurely. You got a 50 mirror coin I can borrow? Naruto nodded and pulled out a 50 mirror coin, handing it over to the silver-haired teenager before him. Yeah, here you go. Cheers. The silver-haired boy said. Alright, watch closely. Blah. Rin started, only to watch as the teen before him flipped the coin into the air. When it began to fall, he watched as the silver-haired boy's arms shot forth and snatched the coin out of midair. Or at least, it seemed that way. To Naruto though, he saw exactly what happened. However, he remained quiet, watching Rin to see if he could figure it out. Now. The bandana-wearing teen said. Which hand is the coin in? Left or right? It's in your Rin started, looking between his two hands. Pointing towards his left hand, Rin said, left hand. The silver-haired teen chuckled and said, too bad. Opening his fist, he showed that the coin was not in that hand. Guess you win. Rin said. I'm usually pretty good at following moving objects, too. Though, wait. You said this was a trick which means. You catch on quick. The teen said before opening his right hand, revealing that the coin wasn't in that hand either. Huh? Rin asked. Chuckling a bit, the silver-haired teen said, keep up the good work, man. You're gonna need to be pretty tough to get through a year with Sarah as your instructor. Oh, and the student council room is on the second floor. Furthest room back. See you around. Have a good weekend. And with a wink, he walked off, leaving Rin and Naruto to their own devices. Rin deadpanned as he looked at Naruto. He never gave you back the 50 mira. Naruto shrugged and said, doesn't matter. He can keep it. If you say so. Oh well, let's get in there and take care of this errand. Rin said before leading the way into the student union building. Without a word said to anyone on the first floor, they proceeded up to the second floor, but paused outside of the literature club's clubroom. Looking at the stairs leading up, Naruto frowned and shook his head. And up there's where the nobles go to get pampered and relax. I swear, nobles get all the good stuff, don't they? Rin chuckled nervously and said, sure seems that way, doesn't it? Naruto quirked a brow as he looked at Rin. You're hiding something, aren't you? Rin quickly shook his head and said, no. Not at all. Come on, we should probably go see the student council president and see what's up. And with that, he hurried down to the end of the hall and waited for Naruto to catch up to him before he knocked on the door. Hello? A familiar voice called out from inside. Please, come in. It's open. Naruto and Rin looked at one another and nodded as one. I recognize that voice. Looking back at the door, Rin said, pardon the interruption. Entering the room, they weren't surprised to see who it was. It was the girl from before the entrance ceremony, the one that took their weapons from them. I thought that was you. Rin said. The petite girl giggled and said, it's been about 2 weeks, hasn't it? Welcome to the student council room, Rin Schwarzer and Naruto Uzumaki. Instructor Sarah sent the two of you, right? Yes. So you're a member of the student council, then? Rin questioned. Seeing the look Rin was giving her, she asked, is something wrong? Oh, I'm sorry. I was just wondering are you a, second-year student? Rin questioned. The young-looking girl giggled again and said, I am, but there's no need for formalities with me. There's no junior or senior in my book. The name's Towa Herschel. I'm the student council president. It's very nice to meet the both of you. President Rin shouted out in shock. Naruto chuckled a bit and patted Rin on the back. I could tell right off the bat. You're a little slow on the uptake, aren't you, buddy? Towa blinked and tilted her head cutely. Does that surprise you? I'm sure I'll have plenty of opportunities to interact with you and the other first years during your time here. So if there's anything you need help with, you just come and let me know, okay? I'll do everything in my power to make it better. Rin smiled at her and said, thank you. That's very kind. Coughing into his hand after a moment to try and compose himself, he said, so the reason we've come here is because you're holding on to something for Class VII, right? Oh, of course. Turning, Towa picked something up off of her desk before turning and handing the items over to Rin and Naruto. Here you go. Rin, yours is the one on top of that pile. Naruto, yours is the one on top of your pile. Rin nodded and looked at the items in his hand. Let's see, our student notebooks. I completely forgot about these. I'm really sorry it's taken so long. Class VI's curriculum is pretty different from any of the other classes. And you're even using a different kind of battle ornament. So yours had to be compiled separately. Towa explained. Meaning, these notebooks have information in them about Rin started. Towa nodded and said, the Arcus, yes. All the student notebooks double as instruction manuals for their accompanying battle ornaments. Add the other first years are all using the same type as last year, so we could just reuse last year's template. But the archetype you're using works quite differently, so we had to write a whole new set of directions from scratch. That makes sense. Naruto said as he flipped his notebook over and looked at the cover for a moment. He'd check it out in detail later. Wait, who's we? Pretty much just me. Instructor Sarah asked me to do it on her behalf. Which means it's my fault this has taken so long. I'm really sorry. Towa exclaimed before bowing to the both of them apologetically. Oh, no. If anything, it sounds like we owe you a huge debt of gratitude for putting so much time and effort into it. Is that really part of the student council's job, though? It seems more like something our instructor should be handling herself, Rin said, sounding rather skeptical. Technically you're right. But she's always so busy, and I help out the other instructors a lot, too, so I don't mind lending her a hand from time to time. Towa explained. Naruto frowned at her and said, you do realize that they're key and of taking advantage of you and your kindness, right? Towa pouted cutely at him and said, that's not true. I like helping out where I can. It's not their fault, I swear. Naruto sighed and said, I swear, you're adorable. If you wanted, you could probably kill someone with your level of cuteness. Towa blushed prettily at this and looked away shyly. I'm not. While Naruto just chuckled a bit, Rin decided to get the conversation back on track. So, you just need us to give these to the other students in Class VII, right? Yes, please. Towa exclaimed, thankful for the change in topic. I really appreciate what you've all agreed to do, too. Naruto and Rin blinked in confusion at this. Huh? Naruto asked. What do you mean by that? Towa giggled cutely and said, I heard all about it from Instructor Sarah. She said you've agreed to help out the student council with our work, right? It's such a nice gesture. You're really getting Class VII off to a great start here at the academy. Before Rin could say anything, Naruto placed a hand upon his shoulder and shook his head. Looking into Towa's eyes, the blonde smiled kindly at her and said, indeed we did. We'll help out however we can, so don't be afraid to assign us tasks you might have a hard time handling or that you might be a bit too busy for. She said you were all really eager to help out, so I should try to delegate some of my duties to you. Towa said, smiling thankfully at them. Naruto looked at Towa and smiled awkwardly. I swear, you're really too damn cute for your own good. Towa pouted cutely at him, which only made him chuckle. Shrugging it off, she said, oh, wait. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to start trying to force work onto you when you've only just enrolled. Rin smiled kindly at her and said, don't worry about it. Your plate is as full as I've ever seen, so if I can help you in any way, please let me. Phew. I worried that I was asking too much too soon. Thank you ever so much. Towa exclaimed, smiling at the two of them. Don't worry though. I won't give either of you anything too difficult. It'll mostly just be fulfilling requests from people in the academy and in Trista. Requests? Rin questioned. Yup. Sometimes people send in feedback and list things they'd like us to do for them, and we try to help out however we can. I'll pick some up for you to do by the end of the day and drop the list in the mailbox at your dorm tomorrow morning. Will that be okay with the two of you? Sure thing. Thanks, Towa. Rin said. Later. By the time they had finished in the student union building and proceeded to leave the building, it had already turned to night. Dusk already? Rin asked. Can't believe she wound up treating us to dinner in the cafeteria. And she's still got even more student council work to do yet. How is she so busy? Naruto shrugged and said, I dunno, but that level of cuteness should be forbidden. I just wanted to hug her and pinch her cheeks, and I dunno what else. She's just way too damn cute. Rin chuckled, but before he could say anything, he received a call on his Arcus. Flipping it open, Rin held it up to his ear and said, hello. This is Rin Schwarzer speaking. Guten Tag, my favorite little wonderkind. I hear you two had a nice little dinner date with the student council president. Ooh la la. Sarah teased. It wasn't a date if there were two of us with her, you know that. And if this is how you treat your favorite little wonderkind, I dread to think how you treat people you don't like. Would you care to explain why you've been signing us up for things behind our backs? Rin questioned somewhat grumpily. I'll skip the details for now, but it's got something to do with the other part of your curriculum that I'll be announcing next week. I thought it'd be a good chance for the two of you to do a little rehearsal before the main event. And since the student council truly is busy, I figured, why not kill two birds with one stone? A fine plan, if I do say so myself. Sarah explained. I have a feeling half the reason they're as busy as they are is because of certain instructors, but alright. I'm happy to play along. Basically, you just want us to spend our free day tomorrow helping the student council, right? Rin questioned. Oh, that's entirely up to you. If there's a club you're interested in joining, far be it from me to force you away from it. Sarah exclaimed. No. To be honest, I still haven't found one that really clicks with me, so that won't be a problem. Naruto's planning to join at least 3 different clubs though, so I dunno, Rin said, only for Naruto to create a shadow clone next to him to prove a point. Never mind. Naruto can help too. Anyways, there is one question I'd like to ask. Why us, exactly? This seems like the kind of task typically entrusted to the class president or vice president. So Emma, or Machias. And even if you were choosing based on social class, Jusis and Laura were both born into noble families. I wasn't. And I don't know about Naruto, but I get the feeling he wasn't either. So what makes us so special, exactly? Well, in a sense, you two are effectively at the center of Class VII. Sarah said. Pardon? Rin asked. I'm not saying either of you are its leader, of course. But in a class full of nobles, commoners and exchange students, you two in particular are special, let's say. Surely even you can see that, no? Sarah explained. Rin frowned and looked at Naruto. Well, Naruto, I suppose I can see. Me, on the other hand. I don't know. Regardless, that's why I decided to give you two first dibs, so to speak. I wanted to get an idea of how things might go from here on out. There's never been a class like yours before, after all. So, there you have it. The beans have been spilled all over the place. Ball's in your court now. Sarah said before she took an audible chug of whatever it was she was drinking. Wait, what are you drinking? Rin asked. Beer, of course. Naruto and Sarah said at the same exact time. It's the weekend and I'm stuck wasting away in my room, imbibing libations, alas. All by my lonesome. If only I had a classy gentleman friend who'd go out drinking with me. But, woe of woes, such a man is nary to be found. Sarah exclaimed. Are you okay? Rin asked unsurely. Never better. But you. Instead of trying to put everything in its place, why don't you just go with the flow for a change? Sarah suggested. It seems like you're desperately trying to find something, but if you don't plant yourself somewhere, you're just going to blow away with the next big gust that comes along. Heh. And on that note. Make sure you're back in the dorm by curfew and all transgressions will be forgiven. Toodles. And with that, Sarah hung up the phone. If I don't plant myself somewhere, huh? Rin questioned nobody in particular. She may have a few screws loose, but she's got a point. Maybe I should just try going with the flow and see what comes of it. Sighing softly, he looked at Naruto and asked, what about you? How do you feel about all of this? Naruto shrugged and said, I'm perfectly fine with it. Fi might not be, but I'm cool with it. And yes, Sarah's a bit odd, but she's got a good head on her shoulders. I think she's pretty awesome, actually. Reminds me of an old friend of mine. Don't ask, I won't say anything about it. Anyways, we should get back to the dorm. Come on. As Naruto walked off, Rin frowned to himself and thought, Naruto's probably the biggest mystery in our class. I wonder what makes him tick. It was a question that would go unanswered for quite some time. Class VII dorm later. Later, after returning to the dormitory and taking care of a few things, Naruto and Rin met up outside their rooms on the second floor and decided that Naruto would head to the third floor to give the girls their notebooks while Rin would handle the other guys on the second floor. Naruto's first stop was Alyssa's room. Knocking on the door, he heard her call out that she'd be right there. When she opened the door, he offered her a smile and said, hey Alyssa. Rin and I are handing these out to everyone. Here, it's your student notebook. Oh, thanks Naruto. Did you need anything else? I was kind of busy, Alyssa questioned. Naruto shook his head and said, no problem. I was just asked to deliver these to you girls. Sleep well, Alyssa. Thanks Naruto. You too. Alyssa said before closing the door again. Next, Naruto went to Laura's room, which was next door to Alyssa's. Knocking on the door, he waited for her to open the door before handing her her student notebook. Thank you Naruto. Will that be all? Yep. You look like you've been pretty busy. Practicing your swordsmanship, I assume. Laura nodded and said, I try to get in some practice every day. I can't let my skills rust, after all. Good attitude to have. Keep it up. I still need to give Emma-chan and Fi-chan their notebooks, so I'll let you be. Have a good night, Laura-chan. Naruto said before he turned and left Laura alone. Knocking on Emma's door, he waited for her to answer the door. Once she had, he handed over her student notebook. There you go Emma-chan. Mind if I ask what you were up to before I bothered you? Emma smiled at him and said, I honestly wasn't doing much. I was mostly just studying and trying to figure out what I am going to do tomorrow. Naruto nodded in understanding. Of course. I'm sure you'll think of something, Emma-chan. Good night and sleep well, okay? Of course. You as well, Naruto. Sleep well. She said before closing the door. Afterwards, Naruto walked to Fi's room and opened the door, stepping inside and smiling at his girlfriend. Hurrying over to him, Fi hugged him tight before they kissed each other. Once they separated, Naruto handed Fi her student notebook. Here you go Fi-chan. You have a good night, okay? I'd stay and cuddle with you for a while, but we boys kinda have to stick to the second floor. I don't think Instructor Sarah would approve of us sleeping in the same bed. I pouted at him and said, no fair. Cuddle time is the best time. Naruto chuckled softly and said, I can't argue with that. Oh well. Hugging his girlfriend close, Naruto gave her another kiss before he turned and left her room, stopping just outside the door to turn and say, good night sweetheart. See you tomorrow, okay? Of course. Night. Fi said. Naruto smiled at her and closed the door behind him. Afterwards, he returned to his room and let out a sigh. Tomorrow's going to be an interesting day for sure. He said to himself before he changed into his nightclothes and went to bed. He'd worry about tomorrow later. For now, he wanted to just get some sleep and not have to worry about anything too crazy for a while. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.